The following is a presentation from the 10th Annual Humanities Days at Montgomery College. The power of humanities to sustain and serve. This year, we offered 32 events via Zoom and in person. To learn more about Humanities Days at Montgomery College and to access other program recordings, please go to this website.
Again, my name is Greg Wall. This is the 10th Annual Humanities Days, a partnership between the Global Humanities Institute and the Paul Peck Humanities Institute. And I'm going to introduce now the editor-in-chief and poetry editor of the Sligo Journal, Michael LeBlanc and David Lott.
Hi, everybody. My name is Michael LeBlanc. I'm chief editor of the Sligo Journal. Thank you, Greg, Professor Wall, for putting this together. As always, it's always a wonderful event. We've been doing this, I believe, 3 years now, and it's always been exciting to be able to come and share the Sligo Journal with you all. We have a lot to do, so I won't drag it out too much, but I do want to just tell you a little bit about the Sligo Journal. It is a unique journal. It's the brainchild of Robert Gyron back in 2010. He came up with this idea. Thank you. And here on your screen, you can see the About Us. You can always access all of our issues online through this website that Professor Wall is sharing right now. Just type in the Sligo Journal, Montgomery College through Google. What makes the Sligo Journal unique is that it not only publishes fantastic student work from our student art gallery, from poetry classes like Professor Wall's, from fiction classes like mine, from the student poetry contest, which Professor Lott will tell us about in a minute. Not only does it publish all that fantastic work, it also brings in voices and artists from our surrounding community. So you might see a student published side by side with the Poet Laureate of Tacoma Park. So it's a very unique journal in that way, and the way it brings together campus and community. And in that way, it really does help sustain and serve both Montgomery College and the larger community. So I am honored to be here today and to be able to be a part of this great event to share the Sligo Journal with you. Professor Lott, is there anything you would like to add?
Sure. I don't want to take up too much time because I know we have a great program and a lengthy one. But I will say that I'm going to put into the chat now our a link to our student poetry contest. And it's actually the announcement, which shows up in inside MC. And let's see if I can do that. So you should see the link there. If you're interested in submitting a poem, you can see how to do that in that announcement. We have been running this student poetry contest for several years now. Please remember that even if your poem does not win one of the top awards, there is prize money, or I should say a gift certificate. Top poem gets $100. The runner-up gets a $50 gift certificate to the to the campus bookstores. But I should also say that any poem of a student's that gets submitted in the contest will be considered for publication, and not just online publication, but actual physical hard copy publication. So have a look at that. If you do not get the information there, remember, you can always email me for any additional information that you need. I put that email into the chat, david.lott, that's 2 T's, at montgomerycollege.edu. I echo my excitement about this, the excitement others have expressed about this presentation today. It's just such a great thing. As Mike and Greg have already said, Professors LeBlanc, Professor Wall, that it's an opportunity to bring so many good things together with the literary arts and assignments too at Montgomery College. This is one of my favorite sessions of Humanities Days, and thank you for letting me participate. Greg, thanks so much for organizing this.
Well, thank you too. So let's start with our program. And please note that some things are being put in the chat about kind of just Zoom decorum as people are reading and Humanities Days programming and stuff. So you'll want to keep up with the chat. And please feel free to put comments and questions in the chat as the event is taking place. We will have a chance to ask questions of the students and poets, and those are not mutually exclusive, and of the faculty who are presenting as well today. If everything goes as expected, we're going to have 4 kind of short units of poets published in the Sligo Journal, who are also members of the MC community, reading their work, and then some students who are in Professor LeBlanc's class. Professor LeBlanc's students and my students have been working on essays that use poetry from the Sligo Journal. And they're going to be presenting a paired poem with the ones that the poets will read. And then they will also be providing some brief comment on their work interpreting those poems in compare-contrast essays. So we've got everybody in the MC community represented here today. First up will be Montgomery College student Tarma Philogene, who will be reading her work, A Prayer to Nature. And I'm just pulling that up. And I'm pulling these up, by the way, directly from the website that we were showing. So because I want to model how slick this interface is and how easy it is to get to the issues and to browse them. So we will go to page 18, where Tarma's poem, Prayer to Nature, is. And we'll have Tarma read her poem. Tarma, when you're ready, how is this view, everybody? Is it okay?
I can see you.
I will scroll as well. Okay.
Hi, everyone. Prayer to nature. May the saints hide my misfortunes. Let the sea drive away the mist. May the waves keep my fears away. May the mountains cover my hours. May the trees absorb my tears. Let the birds take away my doubts. May the earth bury my sorrow. Let the wind sweep my worries. May the universe veil all my fault. Let the branches dance my loves. May the sky heal my illnesses. Let the moon reveal my soul. Let the stars shine my voice. Let the sun spread my joy.
Let's show Tarma our appreciation. This is a wonderful poem and a perennial favorite of students. Thank you so much, Tarma. It's always a joy to hear you read. And Professor LeBlanc, if...
Absolutely. I will take it from here on this one. So my students, and Tarma, by the way, like Professor Wall said, this is one of my favorites for my students to write on. And they love comparing it to this particular poem for reasons I won't reveal, but I believe Gigi Nguyen, who will read this poem and kind of talk a little bit about her essay. Her essay compared and contrasted these 2 poems, and she'll talk a little bit about what inspired her to look at these poems together. So I'm very happy to introduce Gigi Nguyen. Gigi, if you'd be willing to read and share with us your thoughts, it would be much appreciated.
So now I will read the Mother's Tear. Mother's Tear by Sam Nguyen. As the month begins, my eyes slowly open. With every passing night, I watch over my children. My beloved soul, tell me what happens during his reign, and I cannot believe my children are capable of such thing. War, disease, corruption, greed. Since when did my children cross their soul? The guiding nocturnal sun ever watching. Mortal man and their pretty squabble threaten the life of innocence, of unborn offspring, awaiting their turn in the cycle. To my horror, I witnessed many deaths, many souls awaiting judgment. But how can we judge if they perish before given a chance of taking their first step? After tasting one of the sins with coals, men forgot who they are, succumbing to their greed, blinded by lust. They destroy this one beautiful world. Instead of working as one, they puff their chest and boast of their great power. Instead of working together, they led this world to ruin. The guiding nocturnal sun, ever watching, am I worthy of being their mother when I send them to their death? With every tear, the ocean rise, threatening to flood once more. In every lifetime, the outcome remains the same. Mankind will be their own downfall. But what can one do but hope? The guiding nocturnal sun, ever watching. So I choose to compare this poetry with the Prayer to Nature because, to be honest, this two poem is the only two poems that I can understand when I'm reading. But actually, these two poetry have very, very interesting things because they are all gloomy and dark painting, as you can see, and they are all negative side of prayer. And one thing, the basis of comparison for these two poetry is because the two characters in the poetry, they are dealing with the difficulty in their life and they have no choice to solve it but prayer to divine and prayer to God. And that's why I choose to compare these two poetry. And the 3 points for comparison, I think in these two poetry is they have difference through the tone, the word pattern, and also the structure of the two poetry. So let's talk about the first one is the tone. With mother's tear, we can see the tone are filled with anxiety and sobbing because Sam Nguyen had created the picture with the sentence such as war, disease, corruption, and greed. And this sentence can clearly show the worry inside the mother's heart when her children have to deal with this problem and she cannot do anything. Moreover, when Sam Nguyen writes, am I worthy of being their mother when I send them to their death? It shows that the tone has appeared a little bit guilty because the mother cannot do anything, just prayer to divine and prayer to God to save her children. About prayer to nature of Dharma philology, in my personal idea, I think this poetry is talking about the person who are dealing with his illness, and this poetry, the tone is a little bit more helplessness and hopelessness. It's almost all the tone in the poetry is more deadlock. But actually, with the end of the poetry, prayer to nature, we can see such as shine my voice and express my joy. It's have a little bit more positive and optimistic, but it's just like little star in the gray night sky. But actually, it still have the reader to relax somewhat. For Mother's Nature, I think the last sentence is But what can one do but hope? Sam Nguyen, the author, has foretold a future without hope. So it's left many questions to the reader. So I think with the tone, Mother's Tear brings something like anxiety, sobbing, and guilty. And for Prayer to Nature, something like deadlock, hopeless, and helpless. But yeah, the ending of the poetry of both poetry is different. The Prayer to Nature is more optimistic. Secondly, the word pardon have also created a big difference from its poetry. Both poems use words such as tears or horror to express the grief and the fear. With Mother Tear, the word pardon is more about dark word to paint or to describe the negative effect of society at that time. From that, the author make the prayer inside mother heart become strengthened and also more valuable. With Prayer to Nature, as we can see, the two words the author repeat the most is let and may. Let and may, as you can feel, the character don't have any power or don't have he cannot control himself or he cannot make his own decision. Let and may show that he is completely weak and cling on the nature to pray. And as you can see, Tamar Philogene also create a picture with the character without any support from the human. He only cling and rely on the nature. So as we can see, if Sam Nguyen in Mother's Tear use dark word to strengthen the mother's prayer in the society at that time, Tamar Philogene used more deadlock and use more hopeless word to create the loneliness and also the hopelessness inside the character Prayer to Nature. Finally, I think it's very interesting is the structure of the two poetry. These two poetry, as we can see for the Mother's Tear, is strengthened like a lament, like a confession of a mother, something that the mother wants to tell to the reader for the reader to sympathize with her. Also in the poetry Mother's Tear, the last sentence, but what can one do but hope, is like something, it's really sad and really pain because what can one do but hope? It's really hopeless. For Prayer to Nature, I think the structure everyone can see equal length and evenly, literally as a prayer, but like a weak prayer and just a little hope for the character fate. So as we can see, these two poems, these two poetry, they are the same character who are dealing with the difficulty in their life, and also they don't have any choice but pray to nature. But these two poetry have two different emotions. One is helpless and hopeless, and one is anxiety and sobbing. Actually, during this process, and after I finished this essay in class, I learned a lot, not only about these two poems. I learned how to put everything in order and learn how to see an event and poetry from another perspective, another point of view. So I feel very thankful to my professor, Professor Michael LeBlanc, who gave me a lot of chance to improve myself. And also he's the person who gave me another point of view for the poetry for me to strengthen my essay. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Gigi. That was excellent. As you were speaking, I thought of so many other questions about these poems. So as always happens, your work really actually has an effect on the academic community and your ideas resonate with others. There will be a chance, hopefully, if we stay on schedule, at the end of the presentation to ask our poets and our student essayists questions and to make comments about their interpretations and the poems. So next we're going to turn our attention to a new poem. This poem is written by Sydney March. It's called Cuba to Jamaica. Anybody here with Cuban or Jamaican heritage will identify, I believe. Let's see, so I'm going to issue 9. Here we go, page 26. Oops. Professor March, are you here?
Right here.
Great, welcome.
Okay.
Thank you for being here.
Pleasure is mine. Honored to be here. Yeah. Well, this is almost a childhood impression of Cuba is 90 miles away from Jamaica, and always looks across the seas and says, that is Cuba over there when we're kids. That is a whole expansive reflection on just what it meant and what it means now. Okay. Beyond the roving clouds, I embraced your shadow across barriers of consonants and vowels, and gazed at the blue thread of 92 miles I could not cross. From the fringe of mangroves, I watched the agile boats freer than seagulls, swift and reckless, dance carelessly on swells. And imagined the splash of Carib's oars long silenced by time. Our grandparents' parents once stood naked at the edge of endless blue and dreamed of sweltering cane fields at the end of hopeless voyages, or the waves slapping its palm to agitate the broad waters that separate the living from the dead. My memories, like yours, are sometimes nightmares of uncertain voyages, when we cowered in the holds of slave ships. But the time has come. We weep into music and dance to dreams. Your rumba and my reggae shout songs of love, laughter, and lament. We now speak eloquently in the tongues of pirates who pillaged our sacred rhythms. And on the watchful eyes of old men in roving clouds, adrift like dandelions, we count our losses, live, love, and swoon to the music of throbbing drums. Let's forget old griefs and crumbled dreams of uncertain voyages. Let's mock the winds and tides and abandon the perfect blades of our machetes. Send your canoe back to me. Send it full of rhythms across those 92 miles of blue that braid our destinies with those of the invincible dead.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful poem. Professor LeBlanc, if you'd like to turn it over to your student.
Yes, thank you very much. So my student, Carrie Moscosa Pineda, put Cuba, Jamaica side by side with this poem you see in front of you now, Imagine a Wall by Kathleen O'Toole. I am very honored to be able to turn it over now to Carrie, who will read Imagine a Wall and then share her thoughts on why she put these side by side. Carrie?
Imagine a wall. Imagine the Texas-Mexico border bisecting a park expanse of fields and trails and desert pines, soccer pitch on both sides. Zoom out to satellite or helicopter view. Juarez, El Paso, one city or two. Then imagine inserting a 30-foot wall, reinforced concrete with guard towers, where the double-high wire fence now snakes along the I-10, traces what's left of the Rio Grande. Unsightly in position, the last decade's line of demarcation, still sufficient to slow the once natural flow of commerce, waves of family ties ebbing back and forth under the bridge, where contractors now queue up with their high-tech designs, betting millions for their chance to harden the border. Now imagine this, a father and El Paso, skilled craftsmen installing ceramic tiles in a new youth center. From its third floor bay windows, he can see straight through to Mexico, so telephones his son to come to the other side. There is Julio, waving, cell phone in hand, but I cannot see you, pero papá no te puedo ver. Up the stairs to the center's roof, the father sprints, hoping for a better view and to be seen by the son he has not laid hands on or embraced in 8 long years. So I chose to compare these two poems because I saw that both deal with separation of two things. So imagine a wall is the separation between families, and Cuba and Jamaica are like the separation of Cuba and Jamaica, two different cultures, but share a similar past. So I saw that the purpose for this poem, Imagine a Wall, was more on disapproving the southern border and the negative effects it has. And Cuba and Jamaica is more of connecting those two different places together. So I saw that Cuba Jamaica's tone was a little bit more hopeful because he says, let's forget our old griefs and send your canoe back to me. So instead of focusing on the negative past, create a better future, connecting each other despite the ocean, the 92 miles that separate those two places. And Imagine a Wall, it's a little straightforward into showing the negative effects of the wall separating two places that are connected by land, but there's a wall separating those two and the different cultures there is, but they work together. And both of the poems have a sense of love connection. Imagine a Wall has a father and a son that haven't seen each other for 8 years. They could just see each other from a distance, but not be able to hug each other. And in Cuba and Jamaica, they know they're there, but the water is the one that separates. So I also saw a similarity between those two poems, that they both create a setting. They describe their setting really well. Cuba and Jamaica has mangroves in the ocean and describes that really well with a lot of metaphors, and just describes it really well. And Imagine a Wall has straightforward words like imagine this and the quantitative distance and all that. I really liked both of these poems. It really showed me that love creates a bridge. It doesn't matter if there's something separating love, it's always going to be there, not mattering the distance or the physical barriers, it's always going to be there connecting those two people together. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those sensitive interpretations of the poems. We really appreciate it. And I am so curious.
Thank you, Karen.
And I want to say I'm so proud. Thank you, Carrie and Gigi. You guys did so awesome.
Wonderful. So now we'll turn, and then just as a reminder, if some folks have come in while this is going on, there will be some time for question and answer of both for both our student essayists and our poets at the end, if we can stay on schedule, which so far we are, knock wood. And in the meantime, I can't see the chat right now, but please put your questions, comments, words of encouragement, and appreciations in the chat. That's a cool thing about this format, is that there's lots of opportunities to show appreciation along the way. So now let's turn our attention to Alejandro Leopardi's wonderful poem, I should say poems actually, from issue 10, What If? And I'll just go there right now, again modeling how we get around here in the Sligo Journal website, which is so convenient for finding works. So this is on page 24 in issue 10. I'll just use the search function. Now, this poem, and I'll ask Professor Leopardi his wishes here. So this poem is in Spanish and in English. Professor Leopardi, how would you like to handle the reading or readings of these twin poems?
I'll just do the English version for the sake of who's here.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Just so you know, we did read the Spanish version in our class as well, and Spanish-speaking students in my class were rapt and appreciative of that.
Very good. All right. What if? Excuse me. Sorry, it's been a rough morning. What if you take a walk because nothing else matters? What if on that walk you discover a field of sunflowers and lilies and dandelions? You choose to take your walk through the field to embrace the sensation of petals as they brush your skin, breathe in the scent of flowery promise. Each and every step taken creates flourishing blooms, the stalks growing taller, wilder, reaching high above you, enveloping you inside, preserving you. This is the perfect day, the culmination of warm, calm air, soft breeze, and cloudless skies. When you move your gaze away from the floral patch, shift your eyes upward, nothing could be better than this moment right now underneath the blanket of sun. What if when your eyes return to the floral patch, it isn't that at all? What if when your eyes search for the sunflowers and lilies and dandelions, they've vanished, dissipated in an instant? Those blossoms have been replaced by, or always have existed as, a field of wildflowers and weeds and shrubs. They've decimated a once magnificent landscape, turned it dull, lifeless. They never brushed you, but scrubbed and scraped, and the only sensation you feel is agony and sorrow. The walk becomes intolerable, excruciating. This is the worst day, the culmination of frigid, erratic air, commanding winds, and turbulent skies. You seek solace in the guiding warmth of the sun, but you look up to see it, too, has been supplanted by something more ominous, sinister even. What if these two fields are one and the same, existing concurrently? What if you are in one, but also in the other? You are entrenched in an endless tug and pull, each field overpowering at times, submissive at others. You cannot reconcile what one offers and what one takes away, submitting to a squandering crusade to find some semblance of peace, of tranquility. What if you never can? What if this is every day, the culmination of all that was, is, and could be? What if you're good enough? What if you aren't? What if you told someone how the world has turned dark, that the light that once shone bright has been extinguished forever? What if you told them how the field has become barren, its return impossible? No water, no sun, no replenishment. What if they listened? What if you told more people? What if they listened? What if they did something and you did nothing? What if we never know the answers to the what ifs? All we can do is see the people around us, truly see them. All we should do is look for the what ifs in those we care for. All we must do is understand how to uncover the what ifs that turn a field of flowers into a patch of weeds, that turn light into dark forever. What if you don't? What if no one does?
Thank you so much. A powerful poem, and
Sorry to interrupt, but there was a question in the chat. Is there time to hear it in Spanish as well, if Professor Leopardi is willing?
there certainly is time. We are on schedule. Professor Leopardi, would that be okay with you?
Sure.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yep, sorry, my voice is still a little shaky. Excuse me. ¿Qué pasa si das un paseo porque nada más importa? ¿Qué pasa si en ese paseo descubres un campo de girasoles y lirios y dientes de león? Tú eliges dar un paseo por ese campo para abrazar la sensación de los pétalos a medida de que te cepillan la piel, respirar el aroma de la promesa florida. Todos y cada uno de los pasos dados crean florecientes flores. Los tallos crecen más altos, más salvajes, llegando a lo alto de ti, envolviéndote por dentro, preservándote. Este es el día perfecto, la combinación de aire cálido y tranquilo, brisa suave y cielos sin nubes. Cuando alejas de la mirada del parche floral, mueves los ojos hacia arriba, nada podría ser mejor que en este momento debajo de la manta del sol. ¿Qué pasa si tus ojos vuelven al parche floral? ¿No es eso en absoluto? ¿Qué pasa si tus ojos buscan los girasoles y los lirios y dientes de león? Se han desvanecido, se han disipado en un instante. Esas flores han sido reemplazadas por, o siempre han existido como, un campo de flores silvestres y las hierbas y arbustos. Han diezmado un paisaje una vez magnífico, convirtiéndote los aburridos sin vida. Nunca te cepillaron, pero te frotaron y rasparon, y la única sensación que sientas es la agonía y la tristeza. El paseo se vuelve intolerable, insoportable. Este es el peor día, la culminación del aire frígido y errático, los vientos dominantes y los cielos turbulentos. Buscas consuelo en el calor, guía del sol, pero miras hacia arriba para verlo también. Ha sido suplantado por algo más sombrío, siniestro incluso. ¿Qué pasa si estos dos campos son uno en el mismo? Existen simultáneamente. ¿Qué pasa si estás en uno, pero también en el otro? Tú estás arraigado en un tirón sin fin, cada campo abrumado, a veces sumiso a los demás. No te puedes conciliar lo que uno ofrece y lo que uno quita, sometiéndote a una cruzada derramada para encontrar alguna apariencia de paz, tranquilidad. ¿Qué pasa si nunca puedes? ¿Qué pasa si esto es cada día, la culminación de todo lo que fue y podría ser? ¿Qué pasa si eres lo suficientemente bueno? ¿Qué pasa si no lo eres? ¿Qué pasa si le dijeras a alguien cómo el mundo se ha oscurecido, que la luz que una vez brilló brillante se ha extinguido para siempre? ¿Qué pasa si les dijeras cómo el campo se ha vuelto desolado, un regreso imposible, sin agua, sin sol, sin reposición? ¿Qué pasa si escucharán? ¿Qué pasa si le dijeras a más gente? ¿Qué pasa si ellos escucharán? ¿Qué pasa si ellos hicieron algo y tú no hicieras nada? ¿Qué pasa si nunca sabemos las respuestas de los que sí? Lo que podemos hacer es ver a la gente que nos rodea, verlos de verdad. Todo lo que debemos hacer es buscar los que sí en aquellos que cuidamos. Lo que debemos hacer es entender cómo descubrir los que sí, que convierten un campo de flores en un parche de hierbas, que convierte la luz en oscura para siempre. ¿Qué pasa si no lo haces? ¿Qué pasa si nadie lo hace?
Thank you so much. It's always powerful to hear you read this poem, and it's always powerful just to experience these poems in both languages as well. So I do have something to show that students have used in comparison with this poem. And there's also a bit of explanation in the contributor's note that is at the end of every issue of Sligo Journal. And if you're comfortable, Professor Leopardi, would you be interested in just really briefly giving us that context?
Yeah. So normally I don't write poetry. I'm mostly a short story and kind of screenwriter. But once in a while, something will inspire me. And in the middle of pandemic, a friend that I've known since middle school, so many, many years, decades, um, she took her own life, and there was no sign before. She's always been the happiest person I've ever known. And then so when it happened, it kind of just threw me off balance. And I just thought about not seeing that what's in front of you, and sometimes that things look that you're kind of on both sides. So after her passing, I just started to kind of ruminate on a lot of these feelings that we're always kind of sitting in the middle of both sides, and that it doesn't take a lot sometimes to push you off to one or the other. That's kind of the background.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you so much for, on behalf of the community, for sharing this wonderful tribute with us. I always find it very moving.
Thank you.
I wonder if, and I'm not going to put anybody on the spot, but Gael, if my student Gael is here, I think Gael was unable to be here today, but Gael, if you're here, speak up. I can't see the chat. I don't think so. So interrupt me if Gael pops up. But I do have permission to show a pairing that Gael made with this poem in his essay, which I found very interesting and is something I hadn't thought of before, and really gets at the core of this poem, I thought. This year I kind of took my hands off the steering wheel with this assignment, and I don't know if it's a post-pandemic thing or whatever, and I said, you don't have to compare poems to poems, you can compare poems to art. And we included a bunch of stuff that could be compared and contrasted. And and I was really glad I did that, because one thing that happened is that Gael compared that poem to this work in the issue on the cover. This is issue 10, correct? Yes. And this work is called Interdimensional Folding. And that is something to think about, and the interdimensional aspect of it. And in the essay, Gael ruminated on the idea of interdimensionality and kind of parallel dimensions, and connected that to the what if of the poem, and talked about how the what if is another dimension that Professor Leopardi, as the poet, is accessing here, and posited that both the art of the folded, wrinkled idea of dimensions of time and space, that this poem also folds and wrinkles dimensions of time and space, and takes the reader on the poet's or the persona's journey through the what if of time and space, which I thought was a very sensitive and powerful way to access the meaning of the poem that's right there in the poem, and I hadn't thought of it explicitly before. I thought it was wonderful, and I wanted to share that. Okay, thank you so much, and there'll be time for more questions and answers and comments and conversation at the end. So we'll turn now to our last poem and our last reading. And this is Professor Katima Lee's poem. And let me see. So we're going back to issue 8 for this. So we ended up with poems in issues 8, 9, and 10. The current issue of Sligo Journal is issue 11. And we did have Professors LeBlanc and Lott put on a great intro party in the spring for that issue, if I remember right. My interdimensional folding post-pandemic, I'm trying to remember when that was, but it was wonderful, and we had some readings from issue 11, and I invite everybody to peruse that issue after looking at some of these from the previous 3 issues. Professor Lee, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Wonderful. Now, I've also invited, I know I also invited you before to read other works of yours, if you would like, but this is a wonderful poem. I should also give a brief content warning for this poem, and probably should have before, for self-harm, but a brief content warning for allusions to violence. So if anyone's feeling uncomfortable, you could turn off and turn back on. But Professor Lee, as you wish, this poem or some other of your work?
Okay, so I chose something different. But I could read this one if you want me to. It's, it's
there is time, and this is a wonderful poem that everyone is really proud to have
Okay.
in. So maybe we can start with this, and then I'll turn it over to you, and you can do more.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So on defiance and resisting. My father was an imposing man. Most times he would use his size to intimidate. Like Goliath to David, he forced men and women to stand in his shadow, to feel the cold shade of his presence. But I never cowered. My seemingly fragile frame hid the strength of Amazons. From my father, I learned to never fear men or fear the loss of light some may bring, or the dark that comes when a man stands like my father to force uneasiness. Defiance is meeting every giant eye to eye without focusing on arms or hands threatening to limit. Defiance is not letting the death of a woman who blew smoke in the face of a smaller giant break you, or to lose your courage to the truth that even young or aging bodies will never be safe in a world where confiscating rocks and slings, where confiscating rocks and slings trumps everything. Resisting is living between the pendulum of elegance and a shotgun in the face.
Thank you. Powerful poem on defiance and resisting. Let's see, I'm trying to look through my stuff here, and shall I make you co-host if you would like to share, or would you just like to read, or how would you like to handle that?
Sure, I can share it.
Wonderful. Let me see if I can do that. Other co-hosts, if you could jump in. I think I got it, actually. Okay.
Okay, so this poem is something I wrote last winter, I think it is. And I just thought about this poem because yesterday, one of my students talked about how she felt feeling like the blinders have been lifted from her eyes. She's learning about all of these terrible things that are going on in the world. And it just reminded me of this poem I wrote. It's called Warmer Days. Today, there's a polar vortex. I remember when the only thing to fear was a bee sting or the pain of peeling skin from too much sun. Today, it's frozen corneas and confusing cable news. Sure, I can turn it off, turn up the heat, pretend outside is balmy, 80 degrees in the shade. I could refuse to look outside. I could refuse to acknowledge the double amputee on the corner, surrounded by grocery store recycled bags. I could ignore the clunk of coins in his barely gloved hands in 19-degree weather. I could pretend that my body is my own, that my skin is protective, that my home is a true haven shielded by HOA. I could dream of spring cherry blossoms, barriers protecting me from frost to a growing swarm. Instead, I wonder, is it okay to be surrounded by wanted things? Is it okay to dream of warmer days, to imagine soles of shoes kissing petals, carpeting sidewalks, to imagine warm wind willing eyes to close? Is it okay to wish old fears would bloom like seasonal bulbs?
Thank you so much. What a treat to hear a new poem from you
Thanks.
that we haven't heard before. I do want to share one thing here really quickly. So Professor Lee has a book. There we go, Transcript of the Unnamed. I meant to have a copy here with me to show, but I loaned it to a student, so I don't have that. It is a knockout. Every page is fantastic. I'm broadcasting here from 16th and R in DuPont Circle in Washington, D.C. And Professor Lee, I wonder whether you might share with us kind of a summary of the dedication of your book.
Right. So, Transcript of the Unnamed is a book that was inspired by some missing women. There was this unsolved case in the 70s, and there were several girls who were kidnapped and murdered. And every decade or so, their names would come up, and they would talk about this case. And so the book is really inspired by them, just thinking about them, thinking about what could have been for them, and also thinking about my childhood growing up in DC.
Thank you. I am pretty DC centric these days. You might see behind me, statehood is racial justice, and I'm hopeful that one day DC will be a state, and maybe we'll have even more resources for the people of DC, like the ones that you dedicate your book to.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
I'd like to just one more thing before we open it up to questions and answers for everybody. So we finished with Professor Lee's poems as standalone poems. But the theme here has kind of been about making connections between things, comparing and contrasting, connecting with each other, connecting the ideas of the poets with other ideas, connecting poetry with art. And of course, in Humanities Days, I'm feeling very deeply a connection with the MC community, with all the members of it, like the ones that are here and the other ones that we've been communing with during Humanities Days. And so before we go to questions and answers, I'd like to leave the participants here, the viewers here, with the challenge to reread Professor Lee's poem, which is on page 18 of issue 8, on your own, and look through the Sligo Journal for other works of art or poetry or short stories in it that you might make connections with this poem. Connections of comparison, connections of contrast. You've heard our student essayists talk about connections in tone, connections in theme, connections in the personas, that is the speaker of the poem, who we don't always assume to be one and the same as the poet, but certainly there's often an aspect of the poet in it. And for me, thinking about the connections and differences between these works, and especially seeing my students make those connections, has really illuminated so much of it for me. So that's my challenge to you. At this point, we are right on schedule, or a little ahead, which is kind of amazing. and great. So we have time for some conversation. So folks who would like to ask questions or make comments to our poets or to our students who have made their own interpretations, we can open up the floor for that at this point. And before we do that, Professor Lott or Professor LeBlanc, is there anything that that you would add that I've neglected?
I'd love to hear from the audience. I think Shadi has her hand raised.
I have a quick question. Thank you very much. It was very interesting. I really enjoyed the poems. It's been a while. I have my Eli 990 class here, and I wonder if they would be interested in taking a class where you do poetry. Which class would that be? English?
Thank you so much for asking that. So in the spring, I will be teaching on the Tacoma Park Silver Spring campus. Currently, that's scheduled to be a face-to-face class in an actual classroom, but it's English 272, and it is creative writing, an introduction to creative writing for poetry. Now, you didn't hear me read today because, I mean, I have written poems, but I don't have any that I would put in the category of being of the quality of the ones that we have here. So I get my kicks working behind the scenes in that class and with the Sligo Journal. I say that to say that if you are interested in trying to write poetry, or if you already write poetry, I strongly encourage you to take that class, because you won't get a grade based on how good I think your poetry is, because really who would I be to do that? You get a grade on trying to write the kinds of poems that we will study and read and then try to write in different forms with different personas, etc. So you get a good grade in that class if you make an honest attempt to write all of the poems that you want to write, and it counts for humanities general education credit as well, and it's always a nurturing and warm community of poets, both experienced and novice, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's English 272. This was not a plant. Thank you, Professor Ahmad, for saying that, for asking that question. But if anyone here is interested in that class, I would love to have you in it. And I'll just say one more thing about that. At the end of that class, as the portfolio project, students will pick their best poetry, the ones they like the most, and revise them, and then submit them to the Sligo Journal for possible publication and to enter in the student poetry contest, which has cash awards. And often students from that class do end up getting their poems published in the Sligo Journal. And Tarma Philogene, who read today, can attest to that. That was a poem that came out of that class, and it was a complete honor for me to watch and coach Tarma as she produced that poem.
May I add something? So I also, I guess, will take this opportunity to plug the fiction writing class, which is 264. 264, Introduction to Creative Writing of Fiction. I am very happy to say that stories from that class have won awards. And by the way, I think, Greg, we should talk about your class's awards as well in a minute, but have won awards through the Community College Humanities Association Literary Journal Competition for the last 3 years. So coming out of that fiction writing class, we do frequently publish those stories in the Sligo Journal, and some of those continue to win prizes. First prize in that competition, and Professor Wall, your student, if you want to speak to that, just won this last year, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll use that as a teaser for, I mean, I could show the poem, but I want people to get onto the Sligo Journal and website and read these poems. But it was a student who was a wonderful poet, Mary Kate Wilson, who wrote a poem called In the Delivery Room, which is a complete knockout. and it's in the current issue of the Sligo Journal, and it won first place at the Community College Humanities Association, and we couldn't be prouder. So I encourage you to check that out. Questions, comments, words of wisdom?
We have a quiet bunch. Oh, you're muted. You're muted, Greg. I just want to thank everybody for reading their poems. It was lovely to hear the words read. It really was beautiful. Thank you.
If anybody wants to ask a question, feel free to just unmute and go ahead and do that. You can raise your hand, but it might take me a second to see it. I can start if people would like, and I'll ask a question of Tarma. Tarma, your poem, as Gigi mentioned, reads like a real prayer in its straightforwardness, seeming simplicity, but I wonder if you might talk a little bit about the process of drafting and revising that poem into its current state.
Hi, Professor Greg. Thank you. I really appreciate that you invited me here. I just wanted to thank you for that. So initially, the poem was in French, and I've read it like since I was in 9th grade. So at that time when I read the poems, I read the poem, I read it because I was in a place where I wanted like everything to kind of like go away. And at the same time, I was like, I want everything to go away. So I want to attach everything with nature because I feel like nature has so much power and so many things they can like absorb. So that's why I use different element in the nature to use them and then appropriate them to take away a certain thing. I didn't want to just say nature take everything away, but I selected for each specific like element in the nature to take away specific thing because I felt like each of them could, if they have like one specific job and they are good at it, they will be able to take everything away. So that's how I wrote it down. And it's funny as I continued to read it, and when I translated it in English, I'm like, I saw it in a different way. So I'm like, I feel like when I wrote it, it was more darker. I feel like it was darker than as I, in the process of translating and keep reading it, I started to see it in a way of more lighter way, in a sense.
Interesting. How many times would you say that you revised this poem, made revisions to it?
I will say it's more than 10 times because in French, I've wrote it like in different way. So, and then when I wrote it, when I first write the poem, at the end, it like Gigi mentioned, at the end, it did not have a happy ending. It was just like dark at the end. And then I had the last part was at the beginning, and then I had some light scenes in the beginning and put it in the middle, but the end was dark. But as I keep revising it, that's when I ended up having all of like darker, and it's a progression from really dark to like less and less and less to happy.
Thank you. And I want you to know that when we read this poem in our class and students talk about it, that's one of the things that they notice after looking at it a few times too. That progression. So that's really coming through for your readers.
Greg, I have my hands up.
Go for it.
So what I really found interesting, what you're saying, Tarma, is when I've read your poem, I really liked how you said it's almost changed even the way you look at it as a poet. That was really striking, and across two different languages, and how it has changed the way you read your own poem. Because I've always read the poem as a kind of healing poem, right? Like a call to nature to heal. And I think that's probably because of my own bias, or I see this healing power of nature. And then when Gigi wrote her essay and pointed out the vulnerability and maybe the deep sorrow that she saw in the tone, that suddenly put a new light for me that I never considered. And now I see that you even had that initial piece. So that was really interesting. I've made some new connections and new ways of looking at the poem from both of you, Tarma, and Gigi's discussion of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Speaking of poems in different languages, I wonder, Professor Leopardi, whether you would comment on the kind of thing that Tarma was talking about the Spanish and the English version, and kind of the your purpose in both, and what your experience was with those two different versions in different languages.
I think, and she touched on it a little bit about when you translate things, it changes the story a little bit. It changes the idea. And the same thing with me. I actually originally wrote it in English, and I just saw it as like kind of a dark. And you can see how the poem kind of slims down, and there's like the end. In Spanish, it feels more like visual and visceral a little bit. If I can, it felt like I could feel everything around. I just it might be just because of the way that I think in Spanish it feels a lot more flowing. And when I wrote the English version, it was a lot darker. It was more like I knew where the person in the story was going, and in Spanish it felt like there wasn't a direction. I don't know if it came out that way in the poem, but that's the way I wrote it.
That's interesting. I mean, obviously, that's a poem that, like Tarma was talking about her poem, that you also got something out of as not just the writer of it, not just the creator of it, but also as someone who experiences the ideas in the poem as well.
So sorry to interrupt, Greg, but I'm not sure if you can see all the hands up. So Professor Murray's had his hand up for a while.
Yes, thank you. Please jump in and call on people. Thank you.
Question for Tharma, is it? Your name is familiar. I'm part of a community of people who create, write, and translate in Haitian Creole original works as well as translated works. So I'm just curious. I know you wrote the poem originally in French. I'm wondering if any part of your creative process originates in Haitian Creole and then perhaps made it through French and into English. So I'd like to hear about the Haitian Creole influence in your creative process.
Yes. So at first I had it before I wrote it down. I had everything. I had everything in Creole because I grew up like, I can say French is kind of native for me because I learned it like really small. So, but I had the process of like from Haitian Creole and French because I could think of both of them at the same time. So that's why I feel like when I wrote the poem in French, I feel it more powerful and more darker because the choice of word that I use are like deeper than like in French. Like in English, I'm like, I know the word that I want to use, and I like there are certain word until like I started to finally. That's why I feel like it changed it totally because I feel like from French, it was more from French or Haitian Creole. When I word that, it's more darker because I know like more deeper and darker what to use in those languages, and I can really feel it. While when I would it in English, it was earlier in the age when I was like I think I started to really be fluent in English for about a year or so. So there, like the vocabulary wasn't really there. So I had a little bit of struggle of finding the right word, and that process is like it really changed the scenario of having it more as a healing process, and also because when I wrote it, I was in ninth grade and now I'm in college. It's like I have a different thought process. So I'm like, I am not the place anymore. I want to be in a better place. So that's why I have it in the end and like I change it completely. But yeah, it's really like Alejandro said, when I would poems in two different languages, I can see the total differences because Haitian Creole or French, I can feel it deeper than English, and I can use like more deeper word than find it in English.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So Chriselle has a hand up.
Yeah, okay, I just want to make a comment for Professor Lipardi's poem. So when he was reading it in English, I do feel the emotion, but when he read it in Spanish, although I cannot understand exactly what the poem is talking about, but for some reason I felt more connection on that Spanish poem than the English one. So the Spanish poem has more emotions. I can really feel the emotion of the author on the Spanish poem than the English one. I think it has a similar connection to Tamara's Tarma's poem. I can really feel her emotion, even though she said that her Spanish version is more darker than the English. But after she said that, that's when I realized, okay, that's why I had this feeling that in the English poem, she like I felt the struggles, I felt her hopelessness, like what Gigi mentioned, that the author, she's really hopeless, but at the same time she's also hopeful to change the scenario in her life, to go in a different perspective, in a positive perspective of her in what she's struggling. And yeah, all the poem is great. Thank you. And I was also kind of interested in taking the classes, but for some reason I'm not in the Tacoma Park campus. I'm closer to Germantown. I was wondering if there's actually similar classes that offer in either Germantown or Rockville campuses. Sorry.
There are, and in the spring, I believe there is either a Rockville or a Germantown 272 being offered, and some of those might be virtual as well, remote. It could be that the Tacoma Park one will be changed to remote as well. We're looking at that possibility. I prefer being in a room with people when possible. But I also want to get a lot of students involved in. I understand that a lot of students might want to take the remote class, so that's something we're looking at as well. But there are multiple options.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments for our poets or our students? Carl.
Actually, I just want to reflect on something, or ask you all to reflect on something I saw in the chat a little while ago. A student was asking something, and I'm not sure if he or she is still here, or if they are still here. They're asking a question about a major for if you're interested in fiction writing.
English.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, Mariana Reyes asked what major I need to take in order to be a writer of nonfiction books.
I mean, that's an excellent question. And I mean, my answer right away is English, and as kind of, like an English major in my soul, that would be my answer. But I mean, I would also say that thinking about that in two ways, an English major is a very versatile major. So you don't have to go into the academic study of language or literature with an English major. And in fact, for example, many people who go to law school are English majors because precise use of language is, of course, very important in law. And also, I would say that regardless of whatever major you have that you're that hopefully you have followed your interest and your love for knowledge to that major, not only the idea of a good career, but something that you're actually interested in. That there's nothing stopping anybody from writing anything at any time. There are some internal challenges that we feel when we sit down to try to express ourselves on paper and then read it. And that's a difficult thing, I think. Well, I mean, I know it's a difficult thing. Like I said, have very rarely written anything creative that I would want to put forward within this group of excellent things. So, that's the challenge. But, that said, get a pen and a paper or open up your laptop and put stuff on it.
I had a question for Professor Lee. Professor Lee, so I wanted to put in a plug in case folks didn't see in the chat. Looks like you also teach a fiction writing class. That's wonderful. I was wondering if you might speak for a minute about the relationship of fiction and poetry. As a fellow fiction writer, I've also written poetry. Do you see them as complementary? Do you see them as different headspaces? How does your fiction writing and your poetry relate to each other, if you don't mind speaking to that? Thank you.
Sure, yeah. I'm teaching creative writing fiction winter session and in the spring, actually. So I think they're definitely complementary. One of my favorite fiction writers is Toni Morrison. And Toni Morrison infuses a lot of poetry in her fiction. I also write fiction, and I have a lot of poetry in my fiction as well. So I think a lot of fiction writers use poetic devices anyway in their writing. So I think for me, what I like about poetry is it's more, it forces me to be more deliberate in my word choice, right? It forces me to choose the exact words, whereas with fiction, I can just kind of explode on the page and say as much as I want, and then come back and maybe narrow it down a bit. But with poetry, it's very precise. And so I think that, the biggest differences between poetry and fiction for me is just in one place, I can express myself in a lot of words, and another place I have to do it in very few words, or careful, or be more careful with my word choice. But yeah, it'd be great to see some students from this group in my fiction class in the winter session or spring.
Thank you. Professor Lott, I see you had your hand up, and then Alice.
Yeah, let's go to Alice first. I'd like to hear what Alice has to say. Thanks.
Hi, first of all, I apologize, I came in late. I just want to say I'm here just as part of Humanities Week. Jennifer shared the whole curriculum. So I'm just a member of the community. Montgomery College calls us lifelong learners. But this is really, really very interesting. It's nice to be back more in a classroom like this, and enjoyed the sharing and the poems. I live right down the street. The end of my street is a Sligo Park. And so I just I hope I can just continue check into the Sligo Journal as a member of the community, or if there's any other outreach way to participate, let me know.
You could send us any writing, fiction or poetry or art, or you could tell your friends if they write poems to send it our way too. Please do, because we publish the community and the campus. We would love more. We would love more work from you or anyone in your community. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you and welcome. Professor Lott, I think.
Yeah, Alice, by all means, as Mike LeBlanc just said, send us your fiction, your poetry. We publish members of the community as well as, of course, students, faculty, staff. So it would be great to see your work. I just want to say a quick word about connecting to this idea of the humanities, I guess, and the value of the humanities. I think the humanities in particular is very valuable in a time of isolation. So we often find ourselves, during the pandemic, but also maybe because we feel separated from community for one reason or another. Perhaps we're overly sort of teched out. But what we see, I think, in the humanities, and I think it comes across in a lot of these poems, is an attempt to bridge, an attempt to connect. So connect from hopelessness to hopefulness at times. Connect between one country on the border or one country in the distance and another, or connect people in isolation. And there's nothing, in my view, that can make these kinds of important connections for us and connect us here in an event like this, like the arts and humanities. So let's keep in mind that this context of the humanities is extremely valuable in these ways. Thank you.
Great point. Well said. I would like to, speaking of connections and someone who's always making lots of connections, I'd like to see if Professor March would like to talk about some of his many other creative projects that he's got going, because they're really quite impressive.
Well, yeah, I've been lazy. Well, yeah, I've been involved a bit in the literary scene in Washington, D.C. I sat in 2 panels for the Arts Commission over the summer for the individual fellowship grants, for literature-lit grants, and for multidisciplinary grants, which I got films and stuff that I already was very, very little prepared, lots of videos and so on, dance, music. I'm a musician and I've worked with music, worked with dance groups and so on, toured with a couple of dance groups. So I do that type of project. But my pet project is on slave rebellions. And I've compiling a volume of poems that hopefully get done if I don't drag my feet too much. And it's many aspects of slave rebellions. I've written a couple of scholarly articles and so on, and I've done some work for Smithsonian. I presented folklore and tales and so on, and the historical accounts of the slave rebellions in the Americas, in Colombia, Jamaica, Mexico. I'm from Jamaica, of course, and we have 3 separate communities that are semi-autonomous. I've been working on that, and hopefully reveal a little bit more about the struggles of the resistant movements in the Caribbean, going back to early discoveries, early European landings and so on, and both indigenous, back to Black Seminoles here, the Seminole movement here, which are considered Maroons, the same, again, runaways who have gotten together and resisted, formed resistant movements against Yaquis in Mexico and so on. Formidable, challenging colonial rule. In our case, it was at one time Jamaica was really, well, we had a long series of warfare, 150 years warfare against the English, and dozens of treaties were signed. Some actually ceding land and territory. If you go to Jamaica, there are several communities that are semi-autonomous. Visit them, Accompong, and one is Nanny Town, where a woman leader of the Black Rebellion, so on. So I'm doing that, play some music, and play all kinds of music. So I'm a woodwind player, reggae, jazz, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, that's about it. And I'm still working on poetry, and I have a collection of manuscripts of short stories. I've been like the poem I read actually is a part of a series of recollections. My first volume of poem published here was called Stealing Mangoes, and reflected childhood memories, growing up in Kingston. And of course, that was one of the poems outside of that. But I still explore lots of that. Never you leave home, but home comes along with you, and it's a part of culture, of course, that you have. And I've been here many years, but I still am able to do that. Participate in the Black Mosaic exhibit some years ago, Smithsonian, and that dealt with Caribbean and Haitian culture and Caribbean culture. About a couple of years ago, I actually participated again at Caribbean Collective at Smithsonian Folklore, playing music and reading poems related to. So that is kind of what I try to do and continue to try to do. Thanks for inviting me. I'm really thrilled to be here, and it's really great that so many participants are here to share this, and I've enjoyed the poems of everybody who've read, and the critiques have been really blown away with some of the insights and poetry. And yeah, I'll continue to pursue this. As a matter of fact, my master's degree is in fiction from Johns Hopkins University. So I'm not published on fiction, but I definitely, but poetry is my love.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Always making connections. And I think that's a great place to leave it. It's 10:31, that we're making connections with our histories, with ourselves, with each other, with other people's histories. And that's certainly what I get out of this. Thank you so much to our students and faculty members and essayists and participants. What a proud thing for me it is to be involved in this in any way. And I love Humanities Days so much, and the reason I love it so much is because I love MC so much, and this is pure MC, all heart, all heart. Thank you so much, everybody.